From the banks of the Colorado River in Lake Mead to the homes and businesses in Southern Nevada, welcome to Water Smarts, the podcast pumping from the heart of Las Vegas, where we engage with the experts who keep the water flowing throughout Southern Nevada. I'm Bronson Mack.
And I'm Crystal Zelke. From how we treat it, deliver it, use it, protect it, and conserve it, the Water Smarts podcast is all about water in Southern Nevada. We hope to make you a little smarter about the one thing that keeps us all connected: water.
Hey, Crystal, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Bronson. I just went for a walk on my lunch break, and it's so nice outside. But I started to think about how long it's been since we've had rain. It just seemed like, I don't know if it's because of the pandemic and we're all inside of our houses, and so we don't notice it as much. But being outside today reminded me that we had a really dry 2020. And I just wonder what that means for us, in the next year or so here.
That's a good question. I mean, we were like 200 plus days, consecutive days, without any measurable rainfall out at McCarran. I know that we had a little bit of sprinkles here and there and a little bit of rainfall, but it didn't actually land out at McCarran. So we're like 230 plus days or even more at this point as far as not having rain, which does kind of beg the question, are we running out of water?
I don't think so. I think we're well prepared, but I'm not the expert. But I will say that 7 out of 10 Nevadans rely on the Southern Nevada Water Authority for their water supply. 90% of our water comes from the Colorado River via Lake Mead, and the rest comes from groundwater. I don't think we're running out of water. I don't think so.
I hear you loud and clear, but you know what? We're going to ask the experts, because today, to answer that question and many other questions when it comes to water resources, we will be joined by Colby Pellegrino, Deputy General Manager of Resources for the Southern Nevada Water Authority. Colby, welcome to the Water Smarts podcast.
Hi, thanks, Bronson. I appreciate you having me on.
Well, great. I actually do sort of have the luxury to talk with you periodically throughout our day-to-day business that we do, and the amount of information and knowledge that you have with regards to not just water resources in Southern Nevada, but the dynamics on the Colorado River, some of the strategies behind our water resource planning here in Southern Nevada. We're just really happy to have you on and provide our listeners with a little bit of insight. So with that, let's just start like basic level for anybody who lives in Southern Nevada and maybe isn't 100% sure where our water comes from. I mean, we referenced that we get 90% of our water from the Colorado River, but can you expand upon that a little bit and talk about who else shares that river along with Nevada?
Sure. So the Colorado River is actually shared by 7 states and the country of Mexico. So 4 states comprise the upper basin. That's Colorado, New Mexico, Wyoming, and Utah. And the lower basin is comprised of Arizona, ourselves, Nevada, and California. Both of those basins split the river. They each get 7.5 million acre feet of water to develop. And then the country of Mexico gets an additional 1.5 million acre feet of water.
So, Colby, you had mentioned that the upper and lower Colorado River states get an even amount of water between the two areas. But Southern Nevada actually gets a smaller share of water. And we've grown over the years, and we have over 2 million people that live here now. Our situation is far different than it was back then. So why is it that we get such a small share compared to some of the other states?
Well, the Colorado River Compact that set aside what water went to the upper basin and the lower basin was entered into the early 20s. A few years later, the individual states, through various processes in the upper basin and lower basin, divided their shares amongst the states. And those divisions at the time were based upon what was going on and reasonably foreseeable within the basin. And at that time, it was all agriculture. There was no agriculture in Southern Nevada that was reliant upon the Colorado River, and it wasn't foreseeable that we would need resources beyond the groundwater that we were using at the time to sustain our population.
Would we ever try to renegotiate those agreements and try to get a larger allocation for us here in Southern Nevada?
That's something that comes up quite frequently when we talk about the river. And The reality is the river is over-allocated, meaning the amount of water that we thought was available at the time that all of these agreements were entered into is not the amount that we're seeing today. And the stresses of climate change are going to further reduce essentially what the river can supply to the community long term. In order for us to go back and get more, undoubtedly that would mean somebody else has to give up a portion of what they're using in order for Southern Nevada to get more. So we have not gone down the road of trying to get another state that we share the river with to give up a portion of what they may already be using or have planned to use in the future. And instead, we're continuing to work cooperatively with our partners on the river to manage drought, manage climate change, be responsible in the uses of the water, and create new opportunities and innovative solutions where we can tackle the challenges of the river without having to disturb some of those fundamental agreements that created the river allocations.
Colby, you just referenced there climate change and you referenced drought. I think for us here in Southern Nevada, we've really seen sort of the manifestation of climate change in drought conditions. We've been in some pretty significant drought conditions, if I understand it, since the 2000s, which has had some impacts here on our water supply in Southern Nevada. Can you just share a little bit more about how the drought has really affected water supplies for our community?
So when we think about drought and our water supply, again, 90% of the water comes from the Colorado River. So when we talk about there being a drought, we're really talking about the Colorado River Basin and the Rocky Mountains being in drought. In any given year, 80 to 90% of the water flowing through the Colorado River is coming from the Rocky Mountains in Colorado, Wyoming, to a lesser degree, Utah and New Mexico. So when we look at what's been going on at the flow of the Colorado River, we have been in a severe and sustained drought that started in the year 2000. Since that time, we've seen the river's flows dip over 2.5 million acre feet on average below what we were seeing prior to that, or the historic record. This drought is pretty epic in terms of its length and severity, even when we look at longer records, like looking at the paleoclimate record, where we used tree rings to extract what the flows of the river looked like long ago. So this is a severe drought that we're in today. And because of that, we've seen Lake Mead and Lake Powell do exactly what they're supposed to do. The reservoirs are designed to capture inflow in those average and wet years and have it for us to draw upon during the dry years. So we've seen Lake Mead fall more than 100 feet. And for those of us that live in Southern Nevada, that's a very visual representation of drought that a lot of other people in the basin don't necessarily have. What's also unique to our community is that we're drawing our water directly from Lake Mead. No other major water user on the river is. And so that means where our infrastructure sits in Lake Mead relative to the surface elevation of the lake matters for things like water quality and our ability to pump. Many of you know we've put in these expensive and really worthwhile projects for our community to create the third intake and put in the pumping station associated with that so that we're more resilient to drought. Should we hit a shortage in Lake Mead in the Colorado River based upon its elevation, we would not have access to our full allocation of Colorado River water, meaning we need to have enough other supplies within our portfolio that we can make up the shortfall that may be caused by the shortage to our allocation of Colorado River water.
Colby, the Southern Nevada Water Authority is the wholesale provider for Southern Nevada and secures our water resources and then manages those resources. So what has the Water Authority been doing to respond to this prolonged drought?
The Water Authority has been preparing for drought literally for decades. Our water resource plan, which is created and reviewed every single year by our board, takes a 50-year look at what water supply and water demand are going to be in the community to ensure there are no surprises, and that we've taken an adequate look at a wide range of variability in both our water supply and water demand in order to ensure that we can deliver water. One of the things that's come out of that is our water banking programs. We have over 2 million acre feet of water stored, which is basically an 8-year supply of water at our current use rate within Lake Mead, here locally, and with our other Colorado River partners that we can draw upon in the future future. As I mentioned just a few seconds ago, we put in the low lake level pump station and intake number 3, which get us access to that cooler, cleaner water within Lake Mead. And in doing so, actually allow us to be more creative in how we manage our water resources. Prior to having that infrastructure, there was significant risk that Lake Mead could decline to a level where we couldn't pull water out of the lake. Now, we don't have that situation occurring, and we actually are going to be able to pump water even when water cannot be delivered downstream to other users below us on the Colorado River. So that type of security enables us to use and leverage our partnerships on the Colorado River in a way that we hadn't really explored previously. In addition, we're using all sorts of new technology to evaluate water loss and reduce those water losses within the system in order to capture as much water as we can. And the obvious one is water conservation.
So, Colby, you talk a little bit about water loss there. And I think maybe for some people, it's like, well, wait a minute, you're a wholesale water provider. What do you mean when you talk about water loss? Can you just expand on that a little bit? Because we've got a considerable amount of underground infrastructure. We want that infrastructure to be, as watertight as possible. But we also know that there are some losses that can occur. Can you just talk a little bit in more detail about that?
Sure. So water loss is an interesting thing. Our water loss rate is actually quite low. We by far exceed what similar utilities have for their water loss rate. But everybody who manages a water system knows there are leaks and repairs. It's a necessary part of managing that system. So we have put in place an asset management program where we go through and we look at the various infrastructure, its life, what factors are leading to failures that we see in the system, and making sure we're attacking the places in our system that are the most vulnerable to leaks or the need for repairs, and getting ahead of those so that we can ensure we're saving water as well as keeping our system running in tip-top shape.
So we require an ask of our community to do their part to conserve water at home and at their businesses and their outdoor water use, while at the same time as a utility, we're looking at all of our infrastructure and making sure that that's watertight as possible and that we don't have any losses within the delivery system of that infrastructure. Is that correct?
Yep, that's correct.
Impressive. And I also understand that between the authority and the Las Vegas Valley Water District, there's something on the order of like 7,000 miles of underground pipelines. So that's a lot of pipe that we have to keep eyes on. Can you just talk also a little bit more, Colby, about what are some of the other things that you and your group within the Southern Nevada Water Authority are doing to ensure that there is enough water for our community well into the future?
Conservation has kind of been a steadfast part of our water ethic in this valley, at least since the beginning of this drought. And that's still an area where there is a lot of benefit. Removing turf remains one of the cheapest, closest to home, biggest long-term benefits to this community is getting out that turf. In addition to that, when we look at the way we partner with other states in the basin to develop policy and put into place different activities that help protect the Colorado River and water levels in Lake Mead. The most recent of those activities is the drought contingency plan that we entered into in 2018 for implementation starting in 2019. That agreement works to help protect lake levels and the Colorado River as a whole, with everyone collectively taking some action to ensure that the river stays healthy.
So tell us a little bit more about the drought contingency plan and what it does for us here in Nevada and how we're contributing to it.
The Colorado River policy is a lot like how we manage our children. We need some carrots and we need some sticks. And the drought contingency plan is really no different. It created a lot of flexibility for water users and how they can access the water that they've stored in Lake Mead. We have a significant amount of those temporary resources, again, of our own stored in Lake Mead, nearly 1 million acre feet. So that's a great benefit to us. We're able to now access that water during a shortage, which we weren't able to before. But what it does in addition to that is it makes all of the states make commitments to put additional water into Lake Mead. And there's a little bit more flexibility in how you can get that water into Lake Mead And should reservoirs rise again and the Colorado River experience a wet period, we're able to draw some of those supplies out if we need to. So essentially, it's incentivizing more water being stored in Lake Mead. And then should hydrology continue to play out dry and this drought be extended, we're ensuring that even more water is being stored in Lake Mead to prevent the ongoing decline or at least slow it down to a more manageable level.
So the drought contingency plan really works to reduce demands on Lake Mead and allow the states that aren't using all of that water to store that water in Lake Mead, which helps keep water levels higher in the lake, correct?
Yes.
Excellent. And one other thing that's kind of interesting, if I understand too, about the drought contingency plan is that California is one of the participants and one of the partners in the drought contingency plan. Can you just talk a little bit about kind of California's role, why that's rather unique in this particular instance?
Sure. So within the law of the river, which I will try not to dive into the great level of detail with which I understand it and quickly put people to sleep, California essentially has the senior priority. When Arizona went and sought the ability to develop the Central Arizona Project, they needed significant federal funding to do so. In exchange for the federal funding to bring that water into Phoenix, Tucson, Scottsdale, and all the agriculture in those areas, they exchanged with California through federal legislation the junior priority on the river. So the strict interpretation of those agreements are that that entire project goes dry before California would take a shortage. And for any of us that manage water supplies for a large city, it's very hard to believe that we would turn off the water supply to all of central Arizona with California not participating at all to help. But the reality is that's what the law says. And California does have an interest in protecting Lake Mead's water levels. In addition, California stores a very significant amount of water in Lake Mead. And they need to be able to access that when there's dry conditions affecting California. California only gets, on an average year, less than half of their supply from the Colorado River. So they may experience dry years on their other supply projects that don't coincide with drought on the Colorado River. So it's very important that they be able to store that water in Lake Mead, but also that they're able to access it. So they were willing to come to the table and agree to put some water into Lake Mead and to share in the responsibility to protect Lake Mead so long as they got some additional flexibility in how they could manage the water that they have stored there also. The unique situation that creates is a series of checks and balances, because now everyone has water stored in Lake Mead and everyone has to take reductions when Lake Mead's level falls. So you lose some of the risk of one person that doesn't take shortages putting the river in a precarious position because they're not as impacted when the reservoir goes down. So inherently, we've added some checks and balances, which I think create a little bit more trust that we're all working together towards a common goal, and we're not going to make these isolated decisions that only look at our local community, because we now all sort of share in the same impacts of Lake Mead going up and going down.
Become a plant master and save when you apply for the Southern Nevada Water Authority's Water Smart Landscapes Rebate Program. You'll not only save money on your monthly water bill, but the SNWA will give you a cash rebate of $3 per square foot of grass replaced with Water Smart Landscaping. The program has saved our community billions of gallons of water by upgrading nearly 200 million square feet of lawn. Now that's plantastic. Get rid of the grass and make the switch today. For more details, visit snwa.com. SNWA is a not-for-profit water agency. Colby, you had mentioned earlier the possibility of a shortage, and I think sometimes when people hear that, it sounds a little scary. But what is a federally declared shortage, and what would that mean for Southern Nevada if and when that happens?
So the basin states got together in 2007 and signed a series of agreements that took a very long time to negotiate that define when we take a reduction in our use. And those reductions are based upon Lake Mead's elevation. It was very important for us to have defined elevations and volumes because it allows us to plan. And we can use predictive tools like models to see when we might be experiencing those conditions and respond appropriately. So under those shortage guidelines, Nevada forgoes 13,000 acre feet of our allocation at the first shortage level, which is when Lake Mead drops below elevation 1075. As the Lake Mead continues to decline, there's 2 additional shortage tiers that are defined where we increase our contribution to Lake Mead and the amount of water that we're not allowed to use from our allocation. So we have a portfolio approach in place to be able to manage how we would make up supply shortages. The reality is, today, we're using significantly less water than we're allocated on the Colorado River. So even if a shortage were to hit effective next year, we would not see a direct impact to the water that we're using because as we sit today, we're actually storing water that we don't use every single year in Lake Mead. Regardless, we need to keep conserving. The reason that we don't see that direct impact is because this community invested in getting ahead of those impacts and doing the hard work little by little throughout time to get our water use down, get rid of grass, and really manage our water demands so that we would be out of the head of the curve. But that's something we need to keep doing. Keep changing our watering clocks. Keep taking out that non-functional turf.
So wait a second, Colby. I mean, what I'm hearing from you with the system conservation program, banked water in Lake Mead, are you telling me and our audience that the water that we conserve, the water that we don't use, gets stored in Lake Mead or in other water banks for our future use? Is that accurate?
Yes, it is. And that's how we've gotten to that 2 million or so acre feet that we have stored today.
So storing water today is ensuring that we don't have to, number one, go out and get new water resources for tomorrow, that we have banked or stored water supplies for future generations or future years if we need it. Everything that I'm hearing here and everything that I see really points to the importance of water conservation here in Southern Nevada. Can you just briefly touch on and explain a little bit about some of our conservation initiatives? What's our approach to conservation here for the betterment of our entire community?
I always struggle for the best analogy to describe our conservation programs. And I think where I've landed most recently is we have a 4-legged stool when it comes to conservation. And the things that make up those legs are regulations. So those are the things that we put in place to limit the installation of non-functional turf, no turf in new front yards. That's the kind of thing that we're talking about on regulation. Our programs, which is incentive programs paying people to take a water conservation activity like Water Smart Landscaping, where we're paying customers to remove turf. Pricing being the tiered water rates that all of our member agencies have. So as you use more water, you pay more for the water that you use. And then education, really just getting the word out of why water conservation is important and what it means for each of our customers to do their water conservation activities.
Colby, many of our incentive programs and conservation programs focus on saving water outdoors. Why is that so much more important than indoor water conservation?
In the big scheme of things, we're a fairly new community that's developed largely with centralized sewer. Because of that, all of the water that makes it back into our sewer system is highly treated and returned to Lake Mead and does not count against the amount of water that we're able to withdraw. So if we take 10 gallons of water out and it makes its way back, that's a net zero for us. We get to take that 10 gallons out again. What we focus on are what we call our consumptive uses. So that's the water that does not make it back to the sewer and is being used some other way, usually through evaporation, usually through landscaping, also through cooling systems, leaks. That's the water that's not making it back to the drain and making it back to Lake Mead. So that's why we focus on that piece the most.
So, Colby, everything that we use indoors in Southern Nevada gets reclaimed and recycled and returned back to Lake Mead where we can use it again. But everything that we use outdoors, we only get to use it one time. Is that about it?
It's lost forever.
Lost forever. That water that we apply to the grass, that water that we wash the car in the driveway with, that water is a one-time use thing. That's the first and only use we get of that water. But the water we use indoors, we get to continually use it over and over and over again. That's one of the things that makes us a rather sustainable and water-efficient community, is it not?
It is, and it's quite a bit different than all of our other Colorado River partners. We sit so close to the Colorado River that we are able to treat that wastewater and return it back to Lake Mead. So those indoor conservation programs that make sense in California, where water is being discharged to the ocean, or Arizona, where they have to look for golf course reuse and things like that, all of those indoor conservation programs make sense there from a water resource perspective. Here, that doesn't have the same impact. We really need to focus on those outdoor uses.
So now just bring this into total context for us. As we talk about conservation, just how important is conservation to protecting our overall water supply?
I think conservation is the single most important thing that we can do today and in the foreseeable future to protect our water supply. It makes us more resilient. It makes our demands on the river less. It gives us that flexibility to store that water for future use. I think it's the single most important decision we can make as a community is really to double down on our water conservation efforts. We've been incredibly successful at doing that. We use significantly less water today than we did at the beginning of this drought. Last year, we used 35 billion gallons less Colorado River water than we did in 2002, despite our population growing by nearly 750,000 people.
Wait a minute. 750,000 people moved or came to Southern Nevada since the turn of the century, yet we are providing them with 35 billion gallons less. Did I get that right?
We are.
Wow. So conservation does work. What can, I guess kind of as a wrap up for conservation here, just give us just a couple of key things. Like, what are the top 3 things that Southern Nevadans can do to contribute to our overall conservation efforts? Just give me 3.
Sure thing, Bronson. You know, those top 3 things that I'll throw out right off the top of my head are follow our seasonal watering restrictions, report water waste, and get rid of your useless grass. So just to revisit those each in a little bit more detail, regardless of whether you have turf in your landscape, our plants and vegetation do not need as much water in the middle of winter as they do in our 113-degree days that we experience in the summer. Make sure you are changing your clock to follow the seasonal watering schedule. The next one, report water waste. Whether it's intentional or unintentional, there's still a lot of water waste in the valley. We see it every day when we drive around the valley. Somebody has a broken sprinkler. Somebody hasn't changed their watering clock. We get quite a few, this HOA has not changed their watering clock in the middle of the winter. So report that water waste. Let us get out there and remind folks of what they should be doing. And then again, useless grass. Let's take out all of the turf that we're not really using. That turf uses significantly more water than desert landscaping. And desert landscaping done right looks a lot more beautiful than just that little green blanket.
Colby, how can someone go about reporting water waste?
So a great way to report water waste is through the Las Vegas Valley Water District's app. It makes it very easy to go on, take a picture, show where you're at and what you're seeing, and that goes right to our water waste division. City of Henderson also has a similar application, but if you use our app, regardless of where you're at in the valley, we'll make sure that water waste information gets to the right agency responsible.
And what about useless grass? What do we consider non-functional turf here?
So non-functional turf, the most simple test we can apply is if the only person walking on that grass is the person pushing the lawnmower, it should go. We see it all over the valley. The one that's the easiest to point out is drive down any major street in any older part of town, and there will be a nice strip of turf next to the sidewalk in an office park. Nobody is throwing a soccer ball there. Nobody's walking their dog there. No one in their right mind is going to let their child play there. That's the kind of turf that we need to be getting at.
Wow, Colby. So I really appreciate all of the information you've provided to us. I mean, we've heard everything from the detail in what you and the Southern Nevada Water Authority are doing to manage our limited water supply, the partnerships that you have with other states on the Colorado River, the fact that we get the smallest amount of Colorado River water compared to any other state, the drought contingency plan. I mean, obviously, those are a lot of different elements to help make sure that Southern Nevada has a reliable water supply, not to mention conservation. So I guess with all of this, it kind of leads me to my last question and something that Crystal and I were talking about at the top of the show. And here it is. Colby, is Southern Nevada running out of water?
Short answer, no. The long answer is my goal is to make us one of the best positioned cities in the Western United States for dealing with everything the future holds in terms of drought and climate change. I am a Las Vegas native. I was born and raised here. This community means a lot to me. And I take that job very seriously that we have water for this community into the future. So as long as folks continue to use water wisely, get rid of non-functional turf, change your sprinkler clock, fix those leaks when you have them, all of those sort of little things that every person can do have a huge impact on our overall water resources. We'll continue working with the people on the Colorado River and investing in solutions that work for everyone, because this isn't a problem that's just affecting Southern Nevada. It's affecting all of our Colorado River partners, and we really can rise to the challenge and use innovative solutions and technology to ensure that we're sustainable.
Colby, thank you so much for sharing all this information. I think it's really important that we continue to talk about this with Southern Nevadans because of the fact that so many people come here from different places and it's just not the same. So it's important that they understand where our water resources come from, how we use it, and how we're planning for the future. So thank you for being such a wealth of information to us right here on Water Smarts.
And thank you too. It was my pleasure to come and talk about all of these things.
The Water Smarts podcast is brought to you by the Southern Nevada Water Authority, which reminds you to follow the mandatory seasonal watering restrictions. You can find your assigned watering days on SNWA.com. You also can find landscape tips and rebate coupons to help you save water and save money.
And one of those rebates is for the WaterSmart Landscape Rebate Program, which pays you, the property owner, up to $3 a square foot to remove that useless grass and replace it with WaterSmart drip irrigated landscaping. As we heard from Colby, taking out that water-thirsty grass, that useless grass, and replacing it with WaterSmart landscaping saves water, and it also protects our long-term water resources.
You can apply for the landscape rebate at snwa.com. The website also has tips and tools to help you plan your landscape upgrade. You can find desert-adapted plants and learn about their care needs and create a shopping list with the plant search tool. You also can find sample landscape designs for inspiration.
And the WaterSmart Landscape Rebate is available for business owners too, and also HOAs. That's right, I'm looking at you, HOAs. Get that water-thirsty grass out of those areas of your community that are not used by your residents, and you will be doing a benefit to your homeowners by saving water and saving money. Just visit snwa.com for more details. Well, that's it for this episode of Water Smarts. We hope you subscribe and listen next time. You can send us questions by going to the Contact Us page on snwa.com or send us an email directly at watersmarts@snwa.com. We will make sure to get back to you with an answer, and hey, we might even read your question on our next podcast. We'll see you next time on Water Smarts.